back again, back on our bench project here. I went ahead and shot ahead a little bit, did a few things to maybe the video wouldn't look so boring, just continual sawing and stuff. I ended up taking the leg boards and cutting out the recess to look like that there's 4 legs. Laid those out with dividers and a compass and cut them out. Let's see here. Cut it out with a bow saw. Bow saw is the early version of a bandsaw. So that cut this radius with this. I cut it from one side to the middle and then went to the other side and cut it back, because there's only so much room between the beam and the saw blade. Let's see here. That initial cut was cut with a rip saw. The rip saw cut the legs because those are straight down to this point, and then was able to take the bow saw and continue the curve. Now all that is pretty rough, so there's a lot of cleaning up to do. So then we go to a rasp, which is a half round cabinet maker's rasp by Nicholson, and clean that up a little bit. It's still pretty rough, so then what we end up doing is using different spoke shaves to accomplish that. I usually end up using 3 spoke shaves in any spoke shave project, because especially in curves, each curve sometimes approaches a grain differently. This is a round bottom shave, so that gets in there nice. This here comes out here into the flat easier because it's got real flat bottom. On the top, now these legs are just in the dovetail groove, so they're kind of, there's a radius on the top. Now that radius you could probably, I suppose, guess if you wanted to, because a lot of compasses only go so big. That compass there is about 8 inches. Now that ain't going to give you an arc that you need. And you can come up with any various ways using just a strip of wood and 2 nails if you wanted, or a nail and a hole for a pencil. But what we have here is an antique version of Stanley, the Tremel points. Tremel points, they clamp onto a beam, a wooden beam. This again can be a scrap or a dedicated piece. This is the point, and if you want a lead, there's an end over here to hold a pencil. This was set to give that nice long arc from the middle to the other end. And that gives it that real nice long arc that I need. That keeps that consistent by drawing that out. So that's a nifty little tool. Alright, what we're kind of going to be messing around with today is going to be doing the dovetail brace that was common on some shaker benches. So the brace stretches across from the top to the leg. It'll be 45 degrees, and to make layout easier, I'm going to go ahead and use a speed square. These can be handy because they're set automatically at 45. They're fairly accurate for large work. I've got even a larger one for bigger stuff. But what we want to do here is just to get an idea of the length of the braces that we're going to need, because we're going to have to saw this stuff out of a narrower stock. So we take our square, put it in there, and get our legs squared up with the top, both sides. like that. And now to make layout easier, we're going to put that right there on the top and bring that right up there flush. That's about, I think that's about a 6-inch long, 6.5 inch long, or 7-inch length on the square. So that's pretty decent spacing for a brace for this little bench. This thing ain't going to have a whole lot of weight on it, so all these things are going to do is to keep the legs from folding in and out under pressure. So set that there. We mark the longest side, which is this outside right there. Do the same thing for over here. Flip the square over, bring it right up there, bring the square up flush to the outside of the legs, and then mark that. What that'll do is give us a line for the outside of the brace, and that gives us the overall length of the brace that we're going to need, because we have to have an idea of that before we cut it out, because at this point it's an unknown because there's no plans for it. So we'll measure. You want to give yourself a little bit on each end, so it is 10 1/8, but we'll go ahead and make it for about 10 1/2. That'll give us plenty. Now, on your piece, your brace, the two angles will angle back in. So again, this defines the longest measurement for that brace. So 10 1/2. We'll make it roughly 1.5 to 1 3/4, probably 1.5. Keep it a little on the thin side, and we'll lay out our piece on the board. Okay, this is the piece that we're going to use to cut the braces out of. We've got the length marked out here, 10 1/2. Both sections. This end accounts also for the waste that's going to be on the cut. Now we need to mark the width of each board, because then those will get ripped down along through there. So we've set this at I'm going to go with 1.5 inch. This is a depth gauge. And what we'll do is we'll run it right down the edge of the board, and that little pin will mark a groove in there at 1.5 inches from that edge, from the fence here. So all right. Go from the other side now and do the same thing in the same face. For sawing, we could take lay that pencil in there, get right in the groove that's made. So that we can see that to cut. What I'll probably do is make one rip cut right up that middle, and then plane away down to that line. That way I'm making 2 saw cuts. And I will do that before I cut these ends off the board. That way I've got something to kneel on out here as I do the rip cut. Alright, now for our rip cut. I'm going to get out the old Disston thumb hole saw here. This thing is a monster. This has got special rip teeth on it. Difference between rip teeth and crosscut teeth is rip teeth act like chisels. And so they act like sharp chisels, knocking out the grain this way. Crosscut are filed so that they're like knives, so that they sever the grain this way. This is a monster. I rescued this. It had a Girl Scout troop meet at the great big old dairy barn on the Longaberger Homestead place. And the week before they had had an antique group there. And this saw was left hanging up on one of the posts. And that group had done left a long time ago and everything, and there actually wasn't even a price on this. As I'm walking around, I see this old saw hanging there, and I mean, it's nasty. There's no finish on it anymore. It was actually bent a little bit right in there, and it was all rusted up. So I asked about it, and inquired about buying it, and so bought it for $10. Brought it home, took the handles off of it, cleaned the saw plate, sharpened it up, and fixed the little bow or dent right there, or tried to. Cleaned the handle up, finished it, put it back together, and don't do too bad. It's a monster, it's a beast, but it's made for 2 fingers or 2 hands, so that you can grab the saw like this as you're sawing up and down. So that gives your secondary hand a grip, or it gives your pointy finger a place to go into. But see, it has grip that runs both ways, so you could do either or. The holes here are big enough, probably you could use a glove, have it gloved and still be able to cut. Has a nice sway back to it. I think there's no more edge left on it, but I think it's a D8. I may be wrong. I always think the distant numbers D, whatever, D8, D12 sound like Caterpillar bulldozers, because they have the same number. Alright, so what we're going to do here, we're going to start a rip cut. Bring this board back here. We have our 2 lines right here. We're going to take our candle again, especially right through the middle. A lot of spring steel in that. Let's see here. Aha, there we go. It's all tuned up, ready to go. Alright, let's see what we got going on here. Getting her started. Alright, we're going to now cross cut these. So what we'll do here, this is another Diston, Henry Diston saw, and I don't know if you can see it or not, there's just a little bit of the etch left. There's a little bit of the etch left right there in the saw blade. It's all got beautiful cursive writing and everything in there. But it's a show off their guarantee of the saw blade and everything. I think this might be an Applewood handle, may be wrong. This is a 9 TPI, so this has got 9 teeth per inch, and the teeth are filed in cross-cut fashion, so they, like little knives, they sit and they slice the wood across the grain. This saw is probably pretty darn old. It's got a suede back on it, does not have a nib on it, but is a pretty darn good saw. It's an old one. Whoop! Get her tuned up here. There it is, all tuned up. Alright, let's back this up here. Start this cut. Ta-da! Alright. Go clean up our cuts and stuff, and we'll get ready to lay out the dovetail part. We'll need the dovetail part actually to be able to lay it out on the bench then. So we got marks that we marked on there. This is the 1.5 inches that we need. But we need to take these pieces down and be fairly consistent with one another. Got the same thing over here. Now, because the saw mark, I had a lot of leeway there. 2 of these are going to be roughly closer to the same size than the other 2. So we bring those 2 pieces up. The square flat edge that come from the lumber mill or lumber yard, we can use as a beginning reference point. So we use those for bottom. We also want to look at the grain direction to make sure that we're not going to be planing against the grain. We flip those around, try to until it's somewhat satisfactory. Alright. To make sure that the 2 points are within line down here, I usually put a pencil on one end, because if this is humped in any way, you try to line up those 2, they'll be off. But you have this point and this point. If you put a pencil there and set it like that, that plane that's on the bottom should be lined up pretty good. Grab this pretty tight. We're going to set it in here. Clamp down on it pretty good. Now what we'll do is, this is our scrub plane, because we got a long ways to take that down. And so we're going to plane a lot of this down real quick. This is a number 2. What that'll do is clean and straighten that up. Now with that pinched, a little high on that side. That's a little better. Now, clean up this edge. I'm going to need these for reference points to lay out the dovetail part. I don't wish to hog away a lot of stuff. I just want to clean that edge up. So we use just the number 2 on that. And that is probably going to be a little under. Actually, right there is part of my marking gauge. That right there. When I marked it, there was 2 sides to it. So that means I've just come down to my marking gauge line on that end. So we'll see what we got. Yeah, we're a little under, but you know, it is what it is. I can afford to be lenient on that. Alright, set that aside. And I'll do these, and then I'll bring you all back when we get ready to do the laying out of the dovetail, or marking the dovetails out on this. Okay, and we'll lay the bench back up here on the workbench. Square legs back up. pick a piece. We're going to lay that on there. I should have probably had this upside down so I could see both edges. We want a little overhang here and a little overhang there. We did that so that there would be plenty to cut off. What we'll do is take a nice sharp pencil or mechanical pencil, or even your knife, marking knife, and we'll mark these edges right here. Don't move it. Should probably mark the inside too, because there will have to be shoulders. Alright, take that up. We'll mark one. We'll say that this is going to be the inside. Somewhere up here, one. Most of these edges will have to get planed down flush anyhow after everything's in place. So, one is marked for now. Information we need. Go to the next one. Make sure the legs are still square. They haven't moved from checking the other one. Okay. We've already marked out our cross braces here, our dovetail braces. I want to go back, and even though the pencil lines are there, is to knife across the grain. That kind of straightens some stuff up here with the pencil marks, because pencil marks ain't always very definite. So we put the 45-degree side of our combination square on there and just make a light pass across this. What this will also do is when we put it into the miter saw, when we make our cut, if there's any grain rips out as it tries to cut across that, it isn't going to break out down into our good piece. So let's see here. Get her do the old flipperoo. Put it right on that old pencil line and then just lightly score it like that. Do that all the other four pieces, and then what we'll do is take her over here to our miter saw. Now our miter saw this is an oldie, and I had to do a bunch of fixing up on this one. This has a patent date of 8/2 of 04, and so that's not 2004, that's 1904. So this thing's way over 100 years old right now. So, and I think it even still has the original wood platform, the sacrificial piece for the saw to cut into. I don't think the saw is original, but this here is old. I made a bench hook setup so I can just set it on the bench, clamp it in the vise, and go to town on it. When I got it, I had to do straightening up on here because it apparently had fallen off on the floor and bent these rods. So I straightened up, shimmed up with washers, and did all kinds of stuff to try to get that squared up. The saw itself, this was the saw that we used to cut the grooves. It's the back saw, and that is what those big old 26, 27 inch back saws are for. But it sets in there, you put your piece in, there's different marks on here for different degrees. 45 is clear out here. You got any number of them. Get your angle that you want to cut on your piece. So we'll cut that 45. that saw, lift it right on there about the middle of the saw. We're going to cut a little large on this away from the line. So if it sticks out of our joint some, that's fine. We can plane that down. But it's probably better to have a little large than spot on to the thickness of the piece of wood. And I'll show you what I mean by that here in a little bit. So we pull back on this to score the cut. Push it forward. You can clamp this to the thing, but after that saw starts to curve, it should ride within there okay. Take it kind of slow first. Alright. Just breaks out on the other side a little bit. There's our 45. Alright. We'll now lay out the dovetail part of this dovetail. One side of the dovetail is basically already done. As the angle's up, that side of the dovetail, that's it. So what we need to do is now cut this side in and a shoulder. It runs along underneath either the leg or the top. This will automatically be a 45 degree because like that. If you were to take your square and make the opposite of this, well, all you're going to do is make a vertical line, which is fine. There's nothing to say that you can't. Or we can angle that back a little bit. Now, it won't be the same angle as this, but it might look a little more pleasing to the eye if we were to do that. So we will go ahead and cut this like this using our dovetail gauge. Oh, I don't know what it is. It says 14 degrees. I think it's the same dovetail we used on the sliding dovetail, or the angle. So we'll go ahead and do that. We'll make these angles and show you how we cut them here with a handsaw. I will probably knife these out rather than with a pencil. That way they're incised. So what we'll do, none of these will probably be exactly the same. Okay, got one down. This right here will be the waist. Right here. So, here, let me sketch this out. It's knifed in. Right there you'll see the back cut for the dovetail part. Now then what is it, the positive of that, this is the negative, will be the negative when I cut this out. The positive of that we will scribe out onto the piece itself, because each one of these is going to be different in some way, shape, or form. So we do each piece individually so that it ensures that it's a tight fit. What we want to do too is bring, for sawing by hand, because that's what we'll have to do, is bring these knife lines up and across. And that way, when we start to saw, we have a line that we can reference off of. Okay, I'll lay the rest of these out and we'll see when we go. Hello again, we're back. We had a bit of storms, thunderstorms moved in, and then some tornado warnings, so we kind of had to take cover for just a little bit. But also, got to lay out the dovetails, and we not only laid them out, but we knifed in knife marks, and I've been sawing, so we'll saw part of this away and saw this for the shoulder, and then make this notch for our dovetail. So when we do this here, I'll show you how to do it. I'm going to use, since most of these are partially rip / cross cut, using my dovetail saw. Dovetail saw is a Lie-Nielsen. Very nice saw. I've had it for probably 6 or 7 years now. And I actually have done a lot of cutting with it. But it's got real fine teeth. It's got 15 teeth per inch. And it's actually filed in a progressive pattern. So it's partially rip and partially cross cut. So they change as they go along. Excuse me. But this is how we'll do it. We'll cut this long one here to make our shoulder. Go in here, and then that gives us the curve to cut this side and then this side. Now there will still be some chiseling. The very first one I started out with was pretty rough because I was still working out a system. As you can see, that's pretty bad. But after I got the system down pat on how to proceed with the process of cutting it, they worked out pretty good. There'll still be a little chisel work to clean these up, and then we lay these on the bench. We'll lay the bench back on its side, and then mark these dovetails with a knife, and then we take out that material for this to set in, hopefully. So, all right. So I put a peg in here because these cuts are angled in such a way. A standard bench hook isn't going to work because it's at 90 degrees. But this here will give you something to hold up against with your hand, and as your saw pushes against it, yeah, it'll move like this. But our knife wall was cut and made, and this should lay right in that for that initial cut. So, and we don't go very deep, we just go to this depth right here. This side won't matter much because this is waste material over here, or will be wasted out. So, alright. Turn that there. Lay that right in that groove that you made with your knife. Kind of the hardest thing is getting the push stroke started sometimes. Alright. Check our cut periodically so that we don't overshoot our mark. Alright, that's on that mark. Now, that curve has started part of the cut for this down to here, to this point. So now I put this in the vise, pointing up. And even though that is angled, I make sure that the line is plumb. We'll rest the saw in that curve that we just started. Lay it right across. Gotta move that so I can see. And we'll start our cut. Now that should ride right in, partly in that old curve. So that helps control the cut. Come back down to here. Now I've also notched this cut out. And so we put it back in the vise. Make sure that cut is plumb. Ugh. My old vise here's starting to give me fits. Lay your saw right in that knife line. Kind of line it up with the line. I'll try it out. Just like that, right there. Ta-da! Alright, now we've got the cut long ways to do this way, or give us a thickness. And so we can put that in here, just like that. Make sure it sticks up a little. We've got a depth we've got to watch up here on this end, and then just bring it down flush to the shoulder that's right here. Now we're up to the mark on the front side, so now I'll use that same curve to bring the saw back and then lengthen the curve this way, right along that pencil tip. Just like that. Ta-da! Alright, I'll take and clean these up a little bit with a chisel, and then I'll show you how to lay the bench back down, put these on it, and make your knife marks, and get ready for that. See you in a little bit. Alright, we have cleaned up our dovetails. Right there, got the shoulders lined up all the way around. We've, on the inside or underneath, we kind of beveled that off just a tad bit. Did it to both ends. Laid the bench up here on one face. Lined the legs up with a square. Back in here again. Put the square in there, make sure the legs were square with the bottom. And then I had numbered these. So number 4 to number 4, lay that right on there. One nice thing about this relief cut, because we've taken the thickness in a little bit, is that when you go to put that on there, it lays right there, right in that corner, so then you could take your knife and go back and lay out those dovetails. And I have also kept the marking gauge depth that I used right here. That'll be used to gauge the depth for the depth of those tails. So we'll do number 4 and 3 in this case. It's backwards, but it matters a whole lot. So go ahead. Take a nice sharp marking knife, make sure that our shoulders are up tight, top and bottom. Lay our knife in there, very carefully mark the bench. In this case, it's the top edge of the bench. Now we also go back in and do the other side of that dovetail, holding it tight. Alright. Get back down here, making sure it's still in the same place and that we haven't moved it. I know that's tough, but sometimes it slips as you're trying to hold it. Mark that one. Over here. mark that. I'll take a pencil and I'll shade in this area right off the get-go. You know that's the area that's got to be removed. Since we numbered them and have laid it out, that tail will only go there and that tail will only go there. We will now take our marking gauge, go along here, my line to start, and that'll mark the depth. So way up here. Now what we need to do, let me find my really fine pencil. Maybe I don't. I can use a knife. Up here in the top where you just mark the dovetail, take your knife, go right along the edge, and that should fall right into the knife line that you just drew across the edge. Just bring that right down through there and the knife will stop right there. You even heard it. Take your square, lay it up there, bring it right up to the knife. And you know that knife is right there on the spot. Okay, now just mark that. It'll be a little hard on this side, but so I have a depth line marked. It is right there. It's what we just marked with the marking gauge. We take our knife, go down along, right there. And we bring that up there. Right up beside it. And that's marked. Same thing down here, drag it along until the knife falls off into one of those marks. Alright. Mark that as stuff we need to get rid of. Yes. The old continual looking for your tools. Because I'm half blind, sometimes we'll go back and mark these. So right there's that we need to cut out. I'll do this for number 3. And then on the other sides, and then we'll cut them out. See you in a little bit. All right, so we've got everything laid out. You can see right here all my knife marks. I went back in with a pencil so you can see at least most of them anyway. Also got this depth here and this depth over here. This is for the top, and then took the legs apart and got where on both sides where the depth I needed for that. So I'll be cutting in this way. Alright, so let's go ahead and we'll start with the top here. We got another storm moving in, so we might have to head inside. Now these cuts are pretty critical. They have to be right on the knife mark because we took that pattern right off of this. So I can't stray over the line any. That's the only way I'm going to be able to get a good fit on this. So, see how we do. we'll stop right there. So we got lightning and stuff. We have a big 60-foot tree right here off the corner of the garage, pine tree, and I don't like being out here when there's lightning and stuff due to that pine tree. So we're going to go ahead and head into the house. We'll probably come back out here and finish this in a little bit. Hello, we survived the storm. Had another thunderstorm rolled in, and supposedly some tornado sightings down in the county south of us. So anyway, I got all the sockets cut and all the pieces. There's the ones for the table. Now we'll try to put this together and see what happens. I got everything numbered and lettered, so see what happens. Two. See what happens here. At this point, there's no point in putting a square on it because everything's cut, and even though I haven't done a complete dry fit with it together, so hopefully all these will be able to get knocked up here. Hey, look at that. That's one side. That's what we're looking at right there. And we'll go ahead and go along here and we'll plane these down. Put a little glue in here. I've been debating about whether to put a finish nail through here to kind of pin it in. We'll see. Let me get the other side here in. See how that stiffened that right up. Look at that. Right there. That is what we're after. Everything is pretty decent fit. Pretty tight. So, that ain't bad. We'll put a coat of paint on it and put it outside and let it weather and age, and it'll move and distort with weather temperatures and everything. So thanks for following along. Hopefully we'll have more videos coming up. You can follow me on Instagram at Yellowleaf Woodcrafts, and see something you like on there, hit the love button.